Hello and welcome to another coding session. How about that? But you expect that shit to happen yet again. Today is Saturday, and that means today, according to the schedule, we're doing a game development. How about that? We haven't done that one in a while. So we're developing a game which is, you know, it doesn't have any name, it's just called something, and it's going to be a platformer. And right now it looks like this. This is not the final look and feel. This is more of a technological demo. You can find the source code of this game in the description, so it's completely open source. You can check it out. It is written in C++ using OpenGL. We're not using any engines. We actually wrote our own simple engine. And today I wanted to work on a pretty interesting topic. On one of the previous streams, we added the debug mode, right? Basically, you can go into, like, press Q, and here you have a couple of buttons in here. So the green button actually means that you can place new tiles, so you have a simple level editor, and the red one means that you can spawn enemies. But here's the interesting thing: you can switch between these buttons using keyboard, right? But you can't click on them, right? So we haven't implemented that functionality yet. So, and I was thinking how we're going to implement all of that, and it feels like this entire thingy down there screams immediate UI. If you never heard about immediate UI, I really recommend to check out such things as IMGUI. Yeah. So an immediate UI concept is rather interesting. I think the best explanation was done by Casey Muratori in his talk on YouTube. I'm going to give the link to the talk in the description as well. So here is Dear I am GUI. Right, here it is. So, and essentially the idea is that, you know, in a conventional UI, you first build the UI tree, because the elements, the widgets, they're nested, so they form a UI tree, right? You have this UI tree that is built up front, and then you give that tree to the engine, and the engine organizes the loop and renders everything and calls your callbacks for different actions and stuff like that. Immediate UI takes a completely different approach. Essentially, if you want to start rendering the UI, you just say begin, and you start rendering the UI, and then you say begin menu bar, and then begin menu, and then menu item. And what's interesting is that menu item can return you true or false, indicated that it was clicked. And if it was clicked, you can do some stuff. If it wasn't clicked, you render the next one. So basically, you render and handle the widgets immediately, right? That's why it's immediate mode UI. Right, you don't build a tree and then give it to some other entity that does all of that for you. It's not retained, it's immediate. You render and do everything immediately. And it's proven to be very useful in game development specifically. So I also experimented with my own, you know, immediate UI library. I think it's located somewhere in here. So yeah, this is just like a bunch of experimentations. You can find it in here. I'm probably not going to use this library because it's not really suited for my game. Okay, my immediate UI library. How do you spell library? Library experiment. There we go. And inside of that experiment, there is also a link to the Casey Muratori's talk on immediate UI GUI. So he actually explained it way better than me. So I'm going to give the link to his talk in the description as well. So immediate mode graphics UI user interfaces from 2005. My God. All right, so here it is. Okay. And what I want you to do today, I want you to take this thing and sort of extract it to a simple immediate UI framework that integrates well with our game, right? So I could have used something like I'm GUI, right? But here's the thing. I'm GUI doesn't really give us that much advantage in terms of looks, right? Because I'm GUI doesn't really look that great. It's kind of like its default look and feel is okay, but it's not super great. And looks are not the main important point of this UI, because it's going to be the development UI, right? So this is the thing that faces the developer. So look is not really that important. And on top of that, immediate UI GUI, immediate UI is such a simple concept that you can actually implement it yourself. You don't really need to depend on third-party thing to have immediate UI. You can actually, if you do something simple, you can actually implement it yourself. And I discovered that by trying to implement my own immediate UI library. So right, so I'm GUI is actually quite big for what I want. It's supposed to be bloat-free, and I do agree with that. It's bloat-free compared to Qt, for instance. But it's still bigger than what I'm trying to do. Right now, I'm trying to just draw a couple of rectangles. And how much code do you need to add to just draw a couple of rectangles and react to clicking inside of them? Like, you don't need that much code. So that's why I don't really want to depend on third-party things when it comes to like immediate UI. Right, so we're going to quickly implement our own one. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's go ahead and do that. So I think the first thing we want to do is introduce a new entity. Something UI is going to be HPP. If not defined, something UIHPP. There we go. We have include guards. Imagine using include guards in 2021 when there is pragma once. Am I right? Like, why would you even do something like that if there is a pragma once, but that is literally supported by every compiler, even though it's not standard? I don't know why would you do that. It's kind of insane. Cheers. So, and what we need to do in here, we need to define a structure called UI. Maybe I'm going to actually capitalize it like that, because I usually capitalize everything like that in my source code for the consistency. Okay, so what UI need to be able to do? It needs to be able to keep track of the mouse position on the screen. Right. Maybe mouse position on the screen doesn't really matter that much, so some sort of like mouse position, right? So it's going to be vector or float mouse position, right? And we need to also keep track of whether the mouse button was pressed or not. So UI right now won't care whether it's a left button or right button. It's just like mouse button, whatever that's supposed to mean. It's going to be up to the user of UI framework to decide what button it is, right? So it's going to be something like Boolean mouse button, right? So we have a mouse position and mouse button, and our UI just knows about these two things. It doesn't really need to know anything else in here. Okay, so we need a special function that indicates that we're beginning to render the UI, and then we need a special function that indicates that we ended rendering the UI. So, and right now, since we don't really have that much stuff on the screen, right, we're going to support only buttons, right? So it's going to be something like button, right? And it's going to return true, Boolean, not true, true or false, indicating whether this button was pressed or not. So here's the thing. We probably want to be able to render the button with a particular color. We have a special class called RGBA, and this is the color of the button we want to render this thing with. So what's the next thing we need to do? We also need to specify the shape of the button. So I suppose it's going to be AABB with float, and this is going to be the rectangle of the button itself. Does the button need anything else? Maybe. So it probably needs the renderer, right? Because it needs to render itself on the screen somehow. So I guess we're gonna just provide the renderer like this. So it's gonna be a renderer. There we go. And that's 3 basic functions that we need in here. Oh, also a quite important concept in immediate UI. It's the ID. Each element has to be identified somehow, right? So let's actually put an ID in here. And the ID could be anything. is just like any number that somehow uniquely identifies this button, because UI will keep track of these IDs. So one of the important concepts of immediate UI is the active element, right? So the current active element is the button that we're pressing, right? So if we're currently holding on a button and it becomes active, and when we unpress it, by knowing who was active and the fact that the button was unpressed, we can identify that specific button was pressed. So for more information, I just recommend to just watch the Casey Moratorius video where he explained the entire concept of immediate UI, like identifiers, right? So even though the widgets in immediate UI, they're sort of ephemeral, they don't exist, they still need a little bit of attraction. You still need to track them a little bit, because yeah, so making them completely ephemeral is kind of impossible, because yeah, a little bit of traction is still needed. So let's actually put something like this. So we're gonna have an active element. It would be a little bit better, I think, to actually explicitly say that we're accepting an ID here, and this thing is an ID, because the code right now is not very self-documenting. So we can introduce something like ID, and it's going to be size t. I wonder if this will work. I don't remember if you can just do using inside of structures, but maybe you can. I don't know. The compiler will tell us. The compiler will tell us. We don't have to worry about this kind of stuff. There you go. Here's ID, and I guess that's it. So to be fair, we want to be able to colors button differently depending on whether it's active or not. Maybe we need to introduce something like button style, right? Button style, and in that structure, we're gonna have something like RGBA active, inactive, right? So, and instead of passing the color, we're gonna actually pass the style. Right, so there we go. You provide the renderer, then you provide the style, you provide the rectangle, and you also provide the ID. So, and then the user can have a bunch of predefined styles for buttons and switch between them depending on the situation. All right, so let's introduce the CPP file for the UI. So it's going to be something like this. Something UIHPP, right? And I'm going to just grab this into a stuff. So UI begin. So I wonder if I have to do. I think in AIDS I have to do. Yeah, I do have to do. For those who doesn't know, AIDS is my replacement for STD. Right, so I'm not using the standard library of C++. I just wrote my simple thing on top of libc and I called it AIDS. So if you're interested in what it is, you can check it out here. My AIDS library in C++. I'm not sure if I want to put it like that in the description, because you know, to which algorithm and shit, but I mean, who fucking cares, whatever. I still think it's a good name for this stuff. All right, so now we're gonna stop the button. I think to do is actually marked as no exit, so I can just put it like that and don't return anything. So it should be fine. And this is going to be to do. Okay, so we stopped all of the things, hopefully. Let's try to rebuild this entire thing. I think it's not going to rebuild because we didn't add the UI file into the single compilation unit. Yeah. So it's going to be something like this. And if you want to know why I'm including CPP files, this is because this is a single compilation unit. If you never heard about single compilation unit, I really recommend that you check it out. So there's a Wikipedia article. I'm going to put it in the description. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting technique and we're using it in our project. Single compilation unit. I'm going to just put it right here. There we go. Okay, so I think I added this thing to our build. All right, and let's try to rebuild the entire thing. Okay, vec2. So I think I need to include math to be able to actually use vector2. Okay, what's next? Does not name a type. Is it called something else? I think I forgot how my vector 2 called. I think it's called v2. Okay, I completely forgot. I haven't programmed this project for quite some time, so I forgot a couple of things in here. Okay, everything seems to be compiling. We haven't used variables and shit, but apart from that, everything seems to be fine. So let me try to run the project. Alrighty, everything seems okay. So how I want to use this framework? Well, when we're rendering the game, and we're about to render the tool panel, right? We're about to render the tool panel. We just simply iterate through all of the tool panels and render them. So so we have a couple of to-dos in here. Editor tools panel does not allow to select tools by clicking them, so this is precisely what we're working on. Editor tools panel don't have any icons on them, and we're gonna work on that a little bit later. So essentially, we already calculate the position of the panel, right? So we already know about this thing. So I want to replace this loop, actually the internals of that loop, like so, maybe. Because the main problem in here is that we are doing the layouting ourselves, right? We're calculating the paddings, and based on the button sizes and stuff like that, it's very tedious and it's very unreadable. As you can see, like I myself don't know what the hell is going on in here, so I have to read into that. So I want the UI library, UI framework to take care of the layouting in here. So, and what I want to be able to do is just, you know, simply UI button, right? And what button accepts? Button. I'm going to provide the renderer. I do have a renderer in here, as far as I know. I think I have to pass it by a pointer. Right, so then I'm going to have the button style or some sort of a style in here. Then I'm going to have a rectangle, and rectangle is going to be, do I need to actually provide the position? Because AABB implies that you have a position, but the actual position of the button is taken care of by the UI framework itself. So what I'm thinking is that maybe the instead of a rectangle, we should provide the size of this thing, right? So I'm going to replace it with size, and this is going to be just a two-dimensional vector. So it's a width and height. Right now we have a width and height. And what's the size of the button? So do we have a tool button size? Okay, perfect. So that means I can do something like v2 tool button size, and I just specify the size. And what's going to be the ID? The ID is going to be basically the index variable in here. Maybe I'm going to even rename it to ID. So I'm iterating through. Oh, how can I ID? Yeah, there we go. And that should be it as far as I can tell. And I shouldn't worry about this kind of stuff, right? So I can just straight up remove this entire thing. And if one of the buttons were clicked, I can set the current tool to something else, right? So let me see how we can do that. So where do we keep track of the current tool? Yeah, editor tool. Okay, so I can do something like editor tool, where I set editor tool to ID, but also need to cast it to the editor tool. There we go. Something like this. There we go. Okay. And here we specify the position of the panel. So I think in the UI, the begin should accept the place where it starts rendering the UI. So I think it has to be something like this. So we're accepting the position. And essentially, before starting to render this entire stuff, I'm going to say UI begin, and I'm going to use the tools panel position. There we go. Then I render all of the buttons and I handle them. And then I say that I ended rendering everything. So there we go. So this is basically what I want to have to render my UI, like my toolbar panel. So, and if we manage to implement all of these functions, I think it's going to be pretty great. All right, so let me try to recompile this entire thing and see if we have any errors that we need to fix up super quick. All right, so we don't have a UI at all. So I think we need to go ahead and define UI somewhere in here. So right now it's inside of something release. So here's the thing, we have two builds, release and debug, and in release mode a lot of developer features are completely stripped off, right? So do we want to keep UI in the stripped off realm or not? I'm not sure. I think not. Maybe we're gonna start using UI not only for development but also for the game itself. We'll see. So maybe in that case it will make sense to actually, you know, have it inside of the game. So I'm just gonna keep it inside of the game. All right. So do we have anything else? All right. So here is that. I think we need to include something UIHPP in here. All right, so we don't have a style. We don't have a style. I wonder if I can just quickly define that style or maybe keep that style somewhere in a static memory. So tool, tool button style, right? And we can try to put it somewhere in a static memory because why not? Const button style, right? So here it is. Button style, const static, and we can set it to something. I wonder how easy it is to set these things. UIHPP. So we have active and inactive. So when it's active, when it's active, it's going to be. Yeah, let's make it red. I don't know, RGB red. When it's inactive, it's going to be RGB white, right? Something like this. It will actually greatly depend what's the current tool that is selected, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe the buttons should have only like one color, and activeness or inactiveness are basically calculated based on the color. So essentially you provide the color and then the active color is going to be a little bit brighter, and that modification of the color, making the color brighter, will be done by the framework itself. Okay, so I think yeah, that will simplify the current code for now. So I think I'm gonna go that route. So essentially, instead of button style, let's actually just have a color, and the indication of whether the button was activated or not activated is gonna be done by the UI framework itself. The UI framework will take the color, make it brighter, darker, or some other modifications. We just provide the base color, and the UI framework will be allowed to do whatever it wants with that specific color. So I think it will make it a little bit easier. We don't need, you know, two colors. We don't need additional structure, and the entire definition became simpler. Okay, so I think I'm gonna go that route. So, and in here, I'm gonna say that the button is gonna be RGB red, right? So it's just gonna be a red button. By the way, I think we have, yeah, we have editor tool color. Yeah, based on the editor tool, I can just specify the color. So editor tool, but I also need to have this thing. So I'm gonna do tool, and I'm gonna move it in here. So this is gonna be tool, and there we go. Do we need anything else? So this one has to be an ID. I wonder if I can make it a little bit more concise, or maybe it doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let's try to recompile it one more time. One more time. Semicolons in 2021, by the way. No declaration for match. Okay, so we actually were modifying the declarations quite heavily, so they're out of date for now. So now begin accepts the initial position, right? So I think the button is completely different right now. So let's put it like this. And end didn't change as far as I can tell. All right, everything seems to be compiling. So, but as far as I know, it won't work because we will hit todos. Yeah, we hit todos when we're trying to access the developer panel. So we can probably do something like func. Can you do something like func? I should be able to. Yeah. I just want to see what it's going to print. Func. Oh yeah, func is actually like small letters. Okay, let me quickly do that. There we go. And yeah, it actually says your function, but it doesn't actually print the full name of the function. Is there something in C++ to print the full name of the function? Full name of the function. So func something something. Predefined macro for function name, so we'll get the name of the function. If you just want to log the current function name, okay. Okay. If you, so there is a function macro. Okay. So let's quickly take that function. I don't know why I'm wasting time on that. Bike shedding, by the way. I'm in a very bike sheddy mood right now. Don't judge me. Didn't change. Cool. Thank you very much. All right, so I think we should start developing this entire thing. I think I want to make a small break, and after the break, we're gonna, just implement all of these functions. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is define the layout mechanism. So when I was experimenting with immediate UIs, I discovered this layout and mechanism implementation. So essentially, we're gonna have like a Qt style layouts where you have like horizontal and vertical layouts, and essentially you can say that at the top level your layout is horizontal, right? So it is horizontal, and then you have two nested layout boxes, right? And since the red one is a horizontal one, they're going to be placed horizontally, but they are vertical, right? So, and when you put elements in them, they're going to be located vertically. And that way, for example, if you have buttons or editor boxes or some other stuff, they're going to be put like this. And essentially, you're going to have two columns of the widgets, right? By combining the vertical and horizontal boxes, you would be able to achieve like pretty much any layout. Right, and the first thing I want to have in my immediate UI library is this sort of mechanism. Right, I wonder if there's like just way to render a rectangle in this goddamn program, but I don't know, it doesn't really matter that much. Okay, so let's try to implement that. So let's define a layout, right? So this is the layout, and there are two kinds of layouts, right? So the first kind of layout is the vertical or horizontal, as already mentioned. So maybe we can introduce something like enumeration class kind. Well, to be fair, since this entire thing is like already inside of the namespace, maybe it doesn't make sense to actually have enumeration class, because the point of enumeration class is to introduce additional namespace and also make it type safe, but I don't know. So the horizontal one is going to be called horse, and the vertical one is going to be called vert, right? So you have UI, inside of UI you have layout, and inside of layout you have a kind of the layout, and then you can have a variable that identifies this kind of the layout. Okay, so we also need to know where the layout starts, right? So we're going to keep track of the initial position of the layout. So here's the position, and as we add more and more elements to the layout, I should have not closed my pane, but whatever. As we add more and more elements to the layout, the size of the layout cell is going to grow. So we need to keep track of the size of that specific layout cell. There's going to be size. So we have a position and you have a size. So, and as we sort of iterate through the layouts, as we actually, as we traverse the layout tree, we actually need to maintain a stack of the current layouts. So let's actually quickly introduce that stack to the UI. So it's going to be something like layouts, and maybe we're gonna have something like layouts capacity, right? And then we want to have a variable that keeps track of how many of them do we have. So layouts capacity, I think I can just define it somewhere here. It's gonna be const size t, and how nested do we want our UI to be? I think 256 should be enough for everyone. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, we'll see. So this is going to be static. I wonder if it will just work. We'll see, we'll see. All right, so, and what I want to be able to do, I want to be able to define a new layout, so to speak. Okay, so we need two functions. Begin layout, which accepts the layout kind, so it's going to accept layout kind, and it will basically like add a new layout to the stack, and then we're going to have something like end layout, which doesn't really accept anything, it just like pops out the current layout. All right, let's actually stop these functions. UIHPP. This one begin layout. It's going to be UI. To do function. To be fair, it would be better to actually have some sort of like a location in here. Maybe we could have done something like, instead of this entire shit, we could have done file, then line, unimplemented. There we go. So, and we also need to stop end layout. Right, we also need to stop end layout. All right. Let's see if it's gonna compile. Are you gonna compile? Seems to be compiling. And if I try to run the entire game from Emacs, it fails, and it actually tells me where it fails. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So I also want to be able to like push a new layout to the stack and pop the new pop the layout from the stack with like range checks and whatnot. So I need some sort of functions like push layout, and it accepts like the actual layout by value. So since the object itself is actually quite small, we can simply copy it, right? And then we can have something like pop layout. So I'm thinking, should pop layout actually return something like this? Yeah, I think it makes sense. And another thing probably we need is an ability to look inside of the top of the stack, top layout. So let's actually call it top layout. We can actually utilize something like maybe, right? Maybe layout. Right. So when this thing does not modify the UI in here. I just realized that we also need to represent the active, like for example, if you don't have any single active element, we also need to represent that somehow. So I think this one has to be maybe ID. Yeah, I just realized that because I got reminded that we have maybe, so yeah, I need to use that. Okay, so here are the function that we'll need to push and pop out the layouts. So let's actually start them as well. Can I? Yeah, I think I'm gonna just create unimplemented. Do I already have unimplemented? I think I don't have it, so I think I need to actually introduce it. Also, unreachable. Things like unreachable. Do they even print the current location? Do they even print? They don't even print the current location, though it would be super useful. I think all of these things have to be macros. So they can actually print their precise locations and whatnot. I think that would be actually super useful. I'll think about that. But the idea now is going to be just making this like that. It's going to be ED. There we go. And then I can just do unimplemented. There we go. Might as well make it callable, so it kind of feels like you're calling something, even though you don't. Right, it's just like for the sake of looks and feels. Unimplemented. Boom. Cool. So now I can say I'm implemented. Maybe in here I can even just use the function. Why not? Function, or maybe just func. So this is unimplemented. UI unimplemented. Okay. And this one is unimplemented. Everything is unimplemented. Nothing is implemented. Okay, so is it gonna work? Is it gonna work now? Yo, we need to rebuild this entire thing. Okay. Okay, exited abnormally. All right, layout. Oh, this is because this thing is also layout. Okay. Cool. Cool. So why does it keep exiting abnormally? Where's the error? I don't see the errors. So maybe layout. Oh, this one also has to be UI. Anything else? Any other errors we have in here? I think that is pretty much it, right? So, and let me just try to run this entire thing, and it fails. And yeah, should have actually put a space in here at least, but overall, I think it is working. It's really hot in here today, in Siberia, by the way. Okay, begin unimplemented, and you can click on this thing, and it is in fact unimplemented. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? So when I'm starting the UI, what I want to do, I want to actually push a new layout, right? I want to push a new layout, but I need to construct a new layout. How can I easily construct a new layout? Let me see. UIHPP. Can we have like a constructor for this thing? So we have a kind, position, yeah, so let's just have something like layout. You provide the kind of this thing and you provide the position, and the size is by default is going to be equal to 0. But I'm not sure if I try to follow like 0 initialization rule, so maybe I'm not going to use constructors because of that. So let's create a layout. So here is the layout. It's a UI layout. You have to keep that in mind, but maybe if you're inside of this thing, you don't have to do that, or we'll see. The compiler will tell us all this. We don't have to worry about that. Layout position is at this position, and the default layout when you begin rendering, I think it's going to be horizontal, right? So it's going to be layout kind hors. So there we go, we have a horizontal one, and the size is going to be equal to 0, like it's 0 initialized. And then what I'm going to do, I just want to push this new layout onto the stack, right? And when I finish rendering the UI, I want to just pop this entire thing out of this stack, so pop layout. And I don't even need to save it, right? So we can just pop it off, and that's it. All right, so let's see if this entire thing compiles. All right, and it fails at push layout. Actually, no, it doesn't fail at push layout. It fails at, yeah, it fails here. Okay, cool. So I really don't like that we have like a lot of unused variable warnings. So maybe I need to go through all of these things and just mark them off like that, because they kind of clutter the output of the compiler, and I rely heavily on the output of the compiler because the compiler guides me through the process of implementation and refactoring. So for me, it is quite important that the compiler log is very precise. All right, so there's no warnings or anything like that. Okay, and then there we go, so we can push the layout. Okay, so first thing we want to do, we want to assert that we have enough space on the layout stack. So it's going to be layout count is less than layout's capacity, right? Then after that I do layouts, maybe it's layouts count, layouts count plus plus equal to layout. There we go, and that's it. That's it. All right. All right. So now it fails at button. There we go. We managed to successfully push this thing, and now it tries to run the button, but our button is not implemented. Okay. Here's the thing I want to implement before we continue. I want to implement pop layout. It should be relatively easy. So we take layouts count and check that it's greater than 0, and then you simply we need to save the result, I think. So it has to be something like this: result layouts layouts. I think you can simply do layouts minus minus layouts count. How the completion does it work? Yeah, I think that's precisely what we can do in here. All right, so and layout top is going to be like this. If layouts count is greater than 0, we're simply returning true, and layouts count minus 1. Otherwise we're returning nothing. There we go. So this is how we're going to implement this entire thing. All right, so it's quite important to look at the top of the layout stack and know that there is something there. All right. Cool. So yeah, let's try to run it one more time, and I guess we should start implementing the button. We should start implementing the button because that's precisely what it wants us to implement. All right, so to implement le button, we need to know where we can place le button. And the only entity that knows where we can place le button is layout. So we need to actually have a method in a layout that tells us where we can place a next thing inside of that layout. So let's put like this, free position. Maybe not free, because a word free in programming means like very specific thing. It's something related to resources, and you free in the resources, so we don't want to cause any confusion. So maybe it's going to be something like available position. Available position, there we go. So this method just basically tells where you can place your thing. And let's go ahead and implement that thing. So it's going to be available position. It's inside of UI, inside of layout, and depending on the kind of layout, this position is going to be different, right? So imagine that you have this sort of layout cell, right? So this is a layout cell. Oh my god, what the hell is going on? Just render the straight line. Right, if the layout is vertical, the free position is going to be this, right? So this is where you want to put your widget. If the layout is horizontal, the free position is going to be this. So yeah, depending on the kind, it's going to be either this or this. This is the vertical, this is vert, and this is horizontal. So yeah. So let's try to find those things. So let's switch upon the kind. Right, and here we're going to have kind horse. So this is a case, kind horse. And in case of horse, we're going to return. We're going to take the position, add size, but multiply it by what? So basically, if I just add size, I'm going to get this point. But I need to eliminate the x coordinates, so I only need to add y1. So it means I'm going to multiply it by 0, 1. There we go. And this one is going to be kind vert, and you return position plus size multiplied by v2, 1, 0. There we go. So, and that's it. But we also need to check for the, unreachable. Unreachable, and I want to have something like file. Man, I really need to add this file line function thingy to the like aids library, because it seems like it's a very useful idea actually, and I need to make unreachable like a macro. Right, so it's gonna be line, and then we're gonna put it like that. Yeah, I guess. It just depends on what we say in here. I don't remember what we say in aids. So, yeah. Okay. It already says unreachable. I can just put a function in here then. Right, there we go. Okay, let's recompile this entire thing. And we have a problem with multiplication. No matching operator. You cannot just... Oh, okay, because they're doubles. Okay, so I need to turn them into floats. I just need to turn them into floats. All right. Alrighty, so we have all of that. That's cool. Okay, so how are we going to be implementing the button? So first I need to know where I want to render, where I can render my button. So I'm going to just take auto position, and we're going to take top layout, I suppose. Yeah, we need to take the top layout. But here's the interesting thing. If the top layout is not available for the button, I think we need to throw some sort of an exception, because a button should always be rendered inside of some sort of layout. I think we have a pretty convenient function in aids, unwrap or panic, right? Unwrap or panic, right? Which basically checks if the value has some sort of a, if the value exists, and if it doesn't exist, it basically panics, right? So let's do something like unwrap or panic, and yeah, this entire thing will just fail. Okay, so we can even provide a custom message. Button should always be rendered inside of a layout or something like that. So this is a top layout, and button, and let's put it like this. Cool. Button should always be rendered inside of a layout, and after that we know the layout, right? So that means I need to just take its position. So, and it's rather inconvenient, because that means I have to do it like that, and it just looks really ugly. It's almost like I'm programming in Rust. Okay. I don't know. Maybe I should not provide the error message. I think I'm not going to provide the error message. So essentially, you get the top layout, you unwrap it or panic if it's not unwrappable, and then you take the available position. Okay, that's cool. So after that, what do we need to do? I suppose we need to check whether our button is active or not. Right, how can we check if our button is active? Right, if active ID, right, active ID is equal to the ID, but active ID is actually maybe, so it may not exist, right? It may not exist. So that means we need to wrap our ID into maybe. Is there anything convenient to wrap our ID into maybe in AIDS? I don't quite remember. So maybe, oh, there is a sum. Yeah, I can do something like this. Can I? I think I should be able to. Right, active sum ID, and yeah, then you can just simply compare them, and we have a comparison operator there. All right, if this entire thing is active, and yeah, we have an active thing, but the mouse button that we have is unpressed. Right, we have an active button, but the mouse button is unpressed. That means the user unpressed the mouse from active button, and that means we need to register a click. That's what we need to do. But it's quite important that the user unpressed the mouse button while being inside of the button. So that means we need to take the rectangle of the button, and we don't really know the rectangle of the button because we don't pass it, right? So, but we know the size and the position, so that means we can construct that rectangle ourselves. So it's going to be cost auto, and this is going to be a rect, and I think I should be able to construct it from AABB, position and size. Yeah, there we go. So that should be pretty straightforward. I wonder if it will automatically defer all of the necessary types, but we'll see, The compiler will always tell us there's no reason to, you know, doubt the compiler. So is there something like contains, okay, so yeah, AABB straight up has a way to check if it contains a particular point, so we can utilize that. So we take the rect, and the mouse position is contained within the button. That means we just register the click. And as we register the click, we actually become inactive, right? We remove ourselves from being active. So we just say has value equal false. Is there any way to actually make it a little bit more convenient? So we have some function. Is there something like none? I don't know. Yeah, maybe there is no such thing as none. Oh, wait a second. I just remember that there's value or. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that I had this function, even though I implemented this library. Anyway, so we become inactive, and I think we need to maintain the variable called click, right? And we just say that the user has clicked something. Okay, there we go. And after that, we're returning the click. Cool. All right. So another thing, if we are not active, right? If we are not active and nobody else is active, right? We are inactive, no one else is active, but mouse button is pressed. This is sus. We're not active, nobody else is active, the mouse button is pressed, and it's inside our button. It's inside our button. So what we're gonna do in this particular case? Maybe we can actually invert this condition. So maybe we can think about it in a different manner. Like if mouse button is pressed and it's inside of ourselves and nobody else is active, we become active, right? So we become active. So some ID. And yep, I guess that's it essentially. Yeah, that's the simplest logic that we can have in here. We're active, mouse unpressed, we become inactive, we register the click. We're not active, mouse button is pressed and it's inside of the mouse, inside of the button, and nobody else is active, we become active. Pretty straightforward. All right, so the next thing we want to do, we want to probably render the button somehow. So let me actually steal the code that we used for rendering things. We use these things, so fill AABB. I'm gonna straight up like literally copy paste it in here. And maybe I want to remove this stuff. There we go. So here is AABB that we're trying to render, right? So I'm going to use the rectangle. So the next thing is we're trying to render the color. We do know the color. The UI is very interesting. So we need to have an access to the atlas. Damn. Okay, so that one is very interesting. So how can we have an access to? Maybe, you know what? What if the button accepts a pointer to the game? Why not? Let's just let UI to have an access to the game. Or maybe Atlas has to be like a part of the renderer anyway. Yeah, it feels like Atlas wants to be part of the renderer. But for now it would be easier to actually provide like the game like this. Well, I mean it has to be mutable unfortunately, but yeah. No, I don't want to do that. So let's actually provide the renderer and the atlas. Okay, we're gonna put some extra arguments in here, but in the future, I hope we're gonna get rid of them. Right, so it's gonna be atlas. All right, so it's gonna be something like this, right? And then something like this, and that should be it. I hope that's the whole rendering. That invalidated the current signature of the function, right? But let's quickly fix that. So here's the le button, and there we go. Okay, let's see if it's gonna compile or not. Okay, so I need to remove that. That is not needed. All right. So here when I'm rendering things, I'm providing the renderer, and I also need to provide the atlas. All right. Anything else? Okay, active ID was not declared in this scope. Okay, I'm pretty sure I declared it. Did I call just active? Yeah, I call it active. Let's actually call it active anyway. Anything else? A. Seems to be working, seems to be... It can already display this shit. But here's an interesting thing. We forgot a pretty important stuff. We forgot to, after we rendered the button, we forgot to extend the layout. So because we never modified the state of the layout, all of the buttons are rendered in the same place. They're just rendered in the same place. So what we need to do, we need to have a special function in the layout that adds a new widget, right? So add, I don't know, is it going to be called widget? And maybe add size, but that looks weird. Add widget, right? So let's actually call it add widget. Maybe push widget. And we're going to provide the size of the entire widget. So essentially, after we render the button, we need to add the size of the button to the current layout, right? So that's what we need to do. Layout CPP, and let's quickly implement this function. So it's going to be UI layout, and there we go. We're going to switch upon the kind of the layout. So, and depending on the kind, we have horizontal one or vertical one, whichever you fancy. And we're gonna have something that is not reachable in any way, and we're gonna mark it as unreachable. Reach the unreachable. All right, so if it's horizontal one, so how are we gonna be doing that? So if it's a horizontal, we need to take the size X and just add the X in here, but get the maximum between Y, right? So we appended the elements, and if there is a huge, like, tall element that overflows in here, the original layout also has to take that into account. Okay, so let's see what's gonna how we can implement that. So the size in X, if we're horizontal, is going to, it has to be actually maybe let's call it widget size, right? So this is a widget size. We add the X of the widget size, but we're trying to find the maximum between Y's, right? I think it's going to be something like this, maximum, and we are assigning it back to the size Y. So it looks kind of derpy in my opinion, so maybe for the sake of syntactical consistency, I'm going to actually make it like that. Right, so at least you can see that we're assigning X and we're assigning Y. All right, and we can clearly see how exactly it's going on. So in case of a vertical, it's going to be the other way around. Right, it's simply the other way around. We find the maximum between the sizes, the X's, yeah, maximum between the sizes for the X, and for the Y, we just adding it here. So it's going to be size Y plus widget size Y. There we go. So this is how we push the widget. X we add, Y maximum, X maximum, Y add. All right, in the button, after we render the button, what we need to do is to just take the top layout. So this is the second time I need the top layout. But we actually need to add it there. So you know what I'm thinking? I think I'm gonna actually refactor this thing a little bit, and the top layout will now return a pointer, right? Because we want to be able to modify the top layout. So let's actually make it a pointer. And in here, we're gonna do something like this: const outer. It doesn't have to be actually const. It's gonna be layout. Top layout, and we're gonna assert that this thing is not equal to null. And then here, layout, we take the available thing, and after we render this entire stuff, right, we're gonna push widget, and we're pushing the size of the button in there. We're just pushing the size of the button in there. Okay, so let's actually go through the compilation errors and refactor everything. All right, so what do we got? Layout, oh yeah, so this thing now should return a pointer. So, and in this case, we are returning a pointer, but in that case, we're returning null. Okay, so is that a proper thing? Conversion const. So that means this thing should not be const anymore. All right. Cool. Anything else? All right, and as you can see now, it is correct, more or less. At least they're not drawn on the same, in the same place. So for some reason, something went wrong. So we're using vertical layout, but we're supposed to be using horizontal one, right? So let me actually check where I made a mistake. So when I start the thing, I'm using horizontal layout. Okay, so that means I'm calculating something incorrect in case of horizontal layout. All right. So in case of horizontal layout, I actually have to, when I take the available position, oh, I think I have to, okay, I'm an idiot, so it has to be swapped like that, right? I think, right, because horizontal X, right, it's X, and vertical is Y. Okay, so that makes sense. So horizontal X, all right. So do we, did we fix that, all of that? All right, we fixed all of that. That's beautiful. I absolutely love it. So also we're missing the feature where it would be drawn with a different color if it's depending on whether it's selected or not. Right. So we can do something like this. We can introduce the color, and if the tool equal to the editor tool, we are using editor tool color. Otherwise, we are using RGB white. Right, so we're using just a white color. There we go. And here we're going to be using that specific color. Right. Let's see if it's going to work. All right. So as you can see, yeah, I already can switch between them. So we already have a like simple working layout framework, but unfortunately there is no padding between the buttons, right? So let's actually add the support for padding. I think the support for padding has to be done on the level of the layout itself, right? So I suppose padding should be literally like a field in here, right? It should be filled in here, and when we are adding new sizes or calculating available positions, we need to take that padding into account. All right, let's see how we're going to do that. So size, I guess, plus padding. I guess like this. And when it comes to X, right, when it comes to X, is it going to be both X and Y? Maybe it's going to be only for like corresponding things. I don't know. I'm going to just add padding in here. We'll see how it goes. Right. And interestingly enough, when we create a new layout, right, you push the layout and everything's fine. So we need to also specify the layout. I mean the padding. Let's actually provide the padding somewhere here. Layout pad. There we go. All right. So that should fail the compilations in the places where we use UI begin, because now you have to provide the padding. And let's recompile. So what's going to be the padding? We have tools, panel, padding. This is precisely what we're going to be using in here. All right. Tools, panel, padding. Okay. What's the next thing? Size pad. In that case, maybe it would make sense to actually put, well, it's not multiplication. I can just wrap it in V2. Why not? Sure. Is it gonna work? All right, it worked more or less. Can't click on them yet, but yeah, that's already pretty cool. All right, so what's going to be the next thing? So we need to register the clicks somehow, I suppose. How can we register the clicks? To be able to register the clicks, we need to update the mouse position and mouse button. So, and the question is, when are we going to be updating them? I suppose when we receive the mouse position and mouse motion and mouse button click events, right? Every time we receive them, we're actually transferring them to the UI, and the UI can now like use them to do its thing. Okay, I want to make a small break, and after the break, we're gonna implement the actual interaction with the UI elements. Okay, so let's implement that. Where do we keep track of the mouse? I do remember that somewhere inside of the game, we kept track of the mouse in both screen and world coordinates, if I remember correctly. So there's a mouse window and mouse world. This one is rather interesting. Do we have a mouse screen? That will be actually kind of convenient, I think. So I think we do have mouse. Okay, so here is a mouse screen. So mouse window is in the Windows coordinate, basically 0 width, 0 height. Mouse screen is in the OpenGL coordinates, right? So this one is kind of different. But where do we actually set the screen, the window coordinates? So maybe in a place where we set the window coordinates, we can also set the screen coordinates. All right, so let me see. So here's the mouse window, and where do we set the mouse world? Where do we set the mouse world? Okay, so we set it on each update. Right, so every time we update the game, it is set to that. But why is it done on the update? I'm not quite sure. We can do that. We can do that on updating the mouse window, right? Why not? So let's quickly do that. So mouse window equals, okay, so as you can see, we're updating the mouse window and instantaneously updating mouse world. So, and on top of that, we can also keep track of the mouse screen. I think it's going to be generally useful, so let's actually quickly do that. So mouse screen. So essentially we get mouse window. From mouse window we get the screen, and then from the screen we get the world. All right, so let's see where we calculate the screen. So this is where we do that, right, and this is how it's usually done. So to do that we need to window to viewport, right, we take the window to viewport. All right, so should be fine. I think I'm gonna keep it like that. So, and now mouse screen. Okay, we don't need to do that stuff anymore, I'm pretty sure. Mouse screen. Do we need mouse screen in any other places? We do use it only in one place. That's nice. Right, and in the update, we don't really need to do that stuff anymore, but what we do need to do is update the UI. We're going to say UI mouse position, and we're going to use the mouse screen position. That way we are updating the mouse screen position. All right. Is it working? Is it working? Okay, so everything seems to be working, everything seems to be working, but we still cannot click on those things. We can click to create this stuff, right? We can do this kind of stuff, but we cannot click on the buttons. All right, so to click on the buttons, we also need to send the information to UI when the mouse is clicked or unclicked. So is there something like SDL mouse? So this is a mouse motion. What about mouse buttons? Right, so there's a mouse button down, and oh yeah, this one is interesting. So depending on this kind of stuff, we're either shooting or creating elements inside of the game. So, all right, I can do the following thing: UI mouse button button true, and we also need to handle the situation SDL mouse button up. And in that situation, right, in that situation, we set in mouse button to false. There we go. So this is how we send the information about these things to the UI, right? Okay, good. So it takes some time, and now it works. Even though like basically the events propagate to the actions that create things in here, our UI framework actually registers the clicks. That's pretty cool. So how can we actually not make this sort of actions? I don't know. Maybe the way we don't do this kind of actions is by turning this into the immediate UI style as well. Right. So essentially we're going to have a separate function that accepts the UI, right? It accepts the UI and looks if there's something active in the UI. Looks if there's something active in the UI. If there's nothing active and we receive the click somewhere in the world, we just create that thing in there. This is a very interesting idea. This is a very interesting idea. But it needs an access to the whole world. So that means such function should be a method of the of this thing. So all right, let me try to do that. It's gonna be something like editor action, right? So editor action. Yeah. Okay. And I'm gonna put it in here. Game editor action. Mouse. Emacs mouse button down. Right, and I want to move this entire stuff to the editor action. Right, so it's going to be moved in here. Right, and then if editor is not active, we're just doing shoot. Otherwise, we don't. Okay, so maybe because of that, I can do something like this. It's kind of dumb to be fair, so let's actually keep it like that. So if we are in a release mode, editor may interrupt the player shoot. Right, so that should be fine. Okay, so what are we doing here? So here's the editor action. If nobody is active, I become active. Right. If UI active ID doesn't have any value, right? If it doesn't have any value, I become the active one. So, and the question is, what's going to be the ID of the editor action, so to speak? I don't know. Oh yeah. So if nobody is active and the mouse button UI mouse button is pressed, right? Nobody is active. UI mouse button is pressed. We become active. So it's going to be active ID. And let's say that the ID of the editor action is going to be something like 6969. So this is a special dedicated ID for the editor action. Right, we can even put it somewhere here. So it's going to be const size t editor action ID 6969. There we go. So maybe we're going to have a better system for keeping track of the IDs of different UI elements and stuff like that. But yeah, right now we're going to do it like that. All right. Nobody is active. The mouse button is pressed. We become active. Right. Maybe we're going to also invert this logic a little bit. If UI active ID is equal to some editor action ID, right? And the UI mouse button is not pressed. I'm just realizing that we can move this logic of creating, of modifying the game outside of this function. So what we're trying to detect here, we're trying to detect whether a screen was clicked. That's what we're trying to detect. And I'm thinking maybe it could be a special method of the UI object itself. Right, so the UI object itself is going to have something like, so it has a button, and then you have something like screen, right? And screen doesn't really require any rendering or anything like that. It doesn't really require any ID, but the user may provide a special ID, yeah, just in case. So the user may provide a special ID, right? So essentially, we check all of the elements first, and then we check if the screen itself was clicked. And if the screen itself was clicked, based on the current editor tool, we can do something with that. So screen sort of becomes yet another widget, right? It becomes yet another widget. All right. I guess we can do that. So that makes it even better, because that completely decouples logic of clicking on the screen and clicking on the buttons, and also the logic of creating things based on what you clicked, right? Because UI now, if you click on the screen, is not aware about the game whatsoever. Well, I mean, it's still aware about the game in the sense of render and atlas, but I mean, whatever. All right. So let me see what we can do in here. So here's the le button. And what's interesting is that screen doesn't really require any layouts. It literally doesn't care. So yeah, it doesn't need any positions to render. The only thing it does, it checks whether it was clicked or not. Okay, if we are active, right, if we are active and the mouse button is not pressed, we don't even need to check if the mouse is within the screen, because we're gonna assume that it's always within the screen, right? So this entire thing is inactive, and we generated the click. Okay, this became true. We generated the click. Otherwise, if it's not active, mouse button is pressed, and no one else is active, and active ID doesn't have any value, we become active, right? So it becomes some ID. And after that, we don't even need to render anything, we just return the click instantaneously. There we go. So that looks good, I think. So now we have a screen. Right, and inside of the game, we don't even need an editor action whatsoever. We don't need any of this shit. What we need is this logic where you take editor tool and you just create thing based on the editor tool. Right, so and how we're gonna handle all of that? So here is the tool panel, right? So we start the rendering, we check all of the buttons, and then we need to check the screen. So it's gonna be if the user clicked on the screen, and the screen is going to be 6969, right, we're gonna put this logic in here and it will just work. So this is the tool panel. Here we have the buttons. Maybe not, we'll skip it like that. Right, there we go. So let's put this like this. It's going to be const UI ID screen ID 6969, just to, you know, self-document this entire thing. Screen ID. So editor action level editor does not allow to draw. Yeah, so we should not lose this kind of information. So this is the tiles. The level editor does not allow to draw the tiles by dragging the mouse cursor. So this is quite important in my opinion. And it should be actually relatively easy to implement as well with immediate UI, because we know that, okay, the screen becomes active and we're just dragging this thing around. And while it is active, we can just keep, yeah, this actually makes it so fucking easy. All right, I really like that. I really like that. It makes everything simpler. And we don't need editor action anymore, right? So there's just that. And let's try to recompile this entire thing. Recompile. Screen ID. So this one has to be UI, and the ID is UI ID. Look, I just click on the buttons and it seems to be working, and then I click to that one and so, and as you can see, the clicks are not getting through. The clicks are not getting through. It's just like you click on them and it works. Interestingly enough, well, yeah, that was interesting actually. But overall, I think it's kind of working. All right. So we can easily switch between them and just now create that. Cool. This is so cool. I really like that. So yeah. So then I can switch, and I can switch back to the main game. Yeah, that's very, very cool. I can switch between them. And what I did effectively, I implemented the issue where I needed to click on the buttons. So now buttons are clickable. Okay, so I have a couple of unimplemented things in here. So let me see. Yeah, there's this kind of stuff. So begin layout. We never implemented begin layout. All right. So one of the things we probably want to begin, right? We have to provide the kind, and we also need to provide. Yeah. So all of that stuff will be needed when you will start having like nested layouts. We don't really have nested layouts right now, but once we have them, we'll need to implement all of these things. But maybe I'm going to implement that a little bit later. All right. So what do we have in here? So end layout. Yeah, let's put a to-do in here. UI does not support nested layouts. Right, it does not support nested layouts, and I'm going to implement that a little bit later. So I didn't create any branch yet. So, but I think I know what branch I'm going to create. So tools panel does not allow to select tools by clicking on their icons. Okay, so this is going to be the issue 100. Which is Naizu, and let's create an issue 100. Cool. Okay, I want to take a look at the entire div and see how many to-dos we have. So the level editor does not allow. Okay, so I didn't remove that one, so this one is still there. Yeah, so this is the one. Okay. But where is the other to-dos we created? I can't see them. Did I forget to save that? I think I forgot to save that, so it's gonna be... For some reason I didn't show that. This is because probably it didn't show the div of edit files. Probably. So yeah, we have only that one. Oh, because it was never staged, so Git is not even aware about this kind of stuff. Alright, that makes sense. All right, implement simple immediate UI framework, right? And let's push that right into the repo. Let's push that right into the repo, mate. Right into the repo. And let's create a pull request. Okay. Snitch report append body introduced in where? It's introduced in 106. 106, okay, so this is not what I want to report. UI does not support nested layouts. There we go. Okay, so, and I think we managed to implement all of that. Isn't that cool? I think it's pretty goddamn cool. So maybe I can even do something like this. Yeah. So that's pretty epic. That is in fact pretty epic. All right, so I think I'm gonna call it a day. So this was a pretty productive session. We finally implemented the basis for the immediate UI in our game, and that is going to be very useful in the future because we're going to make the UI more and more complicated. We're going to add more buttons, more interactive elements, and so on and so forth. And yeah, that's it for today. Thanks everyone who's watching right now. I really appreciate it. Have a good one, and I see you all tomorrow. I think tomorrow, according to the schedule, we're going to continue doing this game development. Maybe we're going to continue extending the immediate UI. And yeah, I see you all there. I see you all there. Thanks everyone for watching. Love you all. Mwah.